last time we were live, we got disconnected, so we're going to go for about half an hour. I got Spike till 7:30 today. He told me. He promised me. We'll
Yeah.
get him for another
I
20,
promise
27
you, you
minutes.
have me until 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, or Daylight Time, whatever we're on.
That's right. So with that said, Spike, we've got quite a few questions in here that we may not have gotten to last time. And one of the ones I get is, and I know your page gets it and I get asked quite often, people who have family members who are physically disabled, when we talk about eventually, removing regulations as a libertarian in our goals on the platform, people get concerned of things like the first thing we're going to do is go remove handicap parking and Americans with Disability Act
and ramps. Yeah.
Yes. So what can you tell people to put their minds at ease that you're not going to be this radical that's going to take away their the wheelchair ramps and accessibility systems that we have in place right now, I guess.
Okay. Joe and I have no intention of removing wheelchair ramps or any of the things that make things accessible for everyday Americans. We propose getting rid of the barriers and burdens that make things hard for all of us, but especially make things hard for Americans with disabilities. Getting rid of regulatory burdens and taxes and mandates and so forth that make all of our lives harder, especially those who are disabled. We also propose one of the big things there that people that are disabled. I don't consider myself disabled, but I have MS. I have a chronic health issue. And I am often having to face the fact that getting health care is very, very, very expensive for people with chronic health issues. It's expensive for everyone, but it's disproportionately expensive for those of us with chronic health issues, and as well as the disabled, because we need more of those health services than the average American does. We propose medical reforms to the healthcare industry, getting government bureaucracy out of the way, which recent studies have shown would reduce the cost of healthcare that we all need by at least 75%. So that is a way in which we would greatly help all Americans, but especially those who have disabilities and who have chronic health issues and so forth. But no, we have no interest in removing ramps or parking for people that need it or anything like that. That's Harry Brown, who was actually Joe's presidential running mate back in 1996. He used to say that government goes to people and beats them up and takes their money and beats them and cripples them and then takes their money and then uses a little bit of the money to buy them a crutch and says, hey, look, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have a crutch. We're not here to take your crutch. We're here to end the harm that government is doing to you and to everyone else.
All right. And you brought it up in there, you yourself will deal with this. People are concerned, what do we do in the deregulation in the healthcare market, which Joe and you guys have proposed? How would we deal with pre-existing condition situations? And you, I'm sure, have thought about this yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have a major pre-existing condition. Here is the thing, Ryan, and beautiful viewers watching at home. Here is the thing with this. The entire concept of pre-existing conditions and health insurance, for that matter, is entirely a policy, something that has come out as a result of government regulation. Here's what I mean by that. The only reason that you aren't getting healthcare directly from your providers and are instead being forced to go through a bureaucracy-laden, bureaucratic, red tape-laden system like comprehensive health insurance, which exponentially increases the cost of the healthcare that you need on a daily basis, is because of government regulations that injected themselves into the market initially in the 1940s with FDR's executive orders putting wage caps on all salaries, which forced employers to find ways around it. One of those ways was by offering comprehensive health care instead of wages. And then later, the fact that the introduction of comprehensive insurance necessarily increased the cost of healthcare because it introduced an unnecessary bureaucracy that no one actually wanted. And now it has caused the price of healthcare to go up, which then led to the introduction of Medicare and Medicaid, which made the cost go up because of an increasing amount of bureaucracy and central planning that made things harder and harder to provide services and made it not necessarily expensive. bringing us into Obamacare, which then exponentially brought up the cost of healthcare services. When we get government out of healthcare, your healthcare services will drop down to the equilibrium of what patients could actually afford for a very powerful reason. If you can't afford it, then they're not going to be able to make any money selling it. If no one can afford their medications and their services, they have to drop them, or else they're not going to have any patients. So the issue here, when we are talking about pre-existing conditions, health insurance, and the like, the issue here is that we are looking at the end result instead of the root cause. The root cause for why we're even worried about this in the first place is that the government unnecessarily injected themselves into something it had no business getting into, and that the way to get out of it is to get government out of it and get all of those ridiculous regulatory burdens and costs out of it, so that instead of there being 1,000 people between you and your medical provider who all have to be paid before you can get the service you need, remove all of them so now it's just you and the medical professional and the people working directly with them.
Perfect. I'm going to shift gears here. Another one that comes up a lot is, I know you and Joe have talked about eliminating the Patriot Act, rolling back there, but there's other aspects of the government apparatus in that sense. What would you do to get our government intelligence agencies under control with massive surveillance of people, as exhibited by Snowden, who I guess some of his documents have now even been cited in court as showing abuses by the government?
Yeah, in fact, it was actually recently ruled in court that the things that Edward Snowden exposed that the government were doing were all completely unconstitutional. We would not know about it if it wasn't for Edward Snowden. We wouldn't know about the abuses in Iraq, or at least it would have taken much longer for us to know about them if it wasn't for Chelsea Manning. We wouldn't know about all of the things that have been exposed at various levels of government, if Julian Assange and WikiLeaks hadn't leaked these things. Here is what we do in order to be able to get the military-industrial complex and the intelligence services complex in this country under control of the American people. Number one, we end these bad policies. We end the Patriot Act. We end the war on drugs, which has greatly contributed to the massive increase in the surveillance states. Think of all these no-knock raids. Think of all of these warrantless wiretaps for drug dealers. We end the war on drugs. We end the war on the border. We often forget that one of the biggest reasons for all of the surveillance in the first place that is cited is the so-called securing our borders from people who are coming here to work and provide a living for their families, which is not only a massive imposition on them, putting them in cages when they're just trying to come here for peaceful purposes, but it's also a massive intrusion on your life as you're trying to live it. And when you want to get a job, you have to go through a federal E-Verify database to get permission from the federal government to get a job, or in many states to get a new lease, or to get utilities put in your name, or a host of other everyday things that we need to do to survive. We're having to get federal government permission. And all of those programs, it is none of the government's damn business unless they can demonstrate that you are in suspicion of committing a crime, and then they have to go through the due process of actually getting a warrant to do it. So we end all of that. The next thing we do is not only do we protect whistleblowers, we put them on a pedestal where they belong. Whistleblowers are engaging in the most patriotic act that I can think of offhand in this country, exposing the American people to the lies and abuses and obfuscations and terrors being inflicted upon them by their own government. That is as patriotic as it gets. And we need to treat them like the patriots they are, and we need to not only not be prosecuting them and not only be pardoning them, but treating them as the heroes they are.
There, I can hit my buttons. Okay, great.
I thought I lost you again. I thought, oh no, not again.
Oh, it was almost. I almost did the same thing with Joe when I had her on too. We couldn't connect at first. It was a disaster.
Oh God.
But, so a question, I see it in the chat here, and I know we've discussed it on our last interview a little bit, but I think it's never a bad idea to bring up the topic again. But how will disability be paid out if we're removing Social Security? And I know that we've talked about opt-out solutions. So could we explain for some people that are you coming for their Social Security disability benefits?
Yes. So the way we're doing, for those who don't know what our plan is, there's a two-part of it. One is that there are massive amounts of reserves and property that the government can be owed, that the government owns or the federal government claims ownership of, that can be used to pay off some of the unfunded liabilities of Social Security. The other part is to implement the Cato Institute's 6.2% solution. Long story short, if you are on Social Security or disability, you will continue to get it. If you want to remain on Social Security and keep paying into it and getting the terrible, meager returns from it, you can absolutely continue paying into it. If you want to opt out and get 10 times, an average of 10 times the returns in investing your own money instead of using Social Security, and which compounded over time leads you to potentially have hundreds of times more than you would if you just kept it with Social Security, you can opt out. You put up to 6.2% of your income into your own retirement that you can put into and take out of as you wish, and your employer, instead of paying half into that, they pay their 6.2% into Social Security, which allows it to continue to be propped up through attrition over time as more and more people leave Social Security and opt out, and more employers are paying into the system without anyone taking out of it, without their employee taking out of it because they've opted out. That allows that 6.2% to go down over time to a lower amount that businesses can afford, and eventually for us to be able to opt out of Social Security and dismantle that Ponzi scheme, which it's a Ponzi scheme, dismantle that Ponzi scheme while protecting the people who are still on it. We are not coming for your Social Security. We are not coming for your disability. Again, we are not here to remove social safety nets. We are here to put the ladders back so that the people who are able to can climb out of those ladders, and the people who aren't in a position to be able to remain in them and are able to be protected.
All right. So let's shift here. I get quite a few questions. They all kind of resolve around family-related issues. So number one is adoption reform. We've discussed that in various topics everywhere, ranging from abortion and taking care of the people we have in the foster care system.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you think you and Joe can do to reform the adoption system to improve it today?
If you want to adopt a child, it is none of the federal government's business, one way or the other. They should not be trying to make it harder for you to adopt, which is what is leading to so many children that are in the foster care system, where their potential for being abused, by the way, goes up quite a bit in the first place. And that's before we even get into all the problems with family law and CPS and everything else. Just focusing on the children who are being taken out of bad situations and there are homes that are ready to accept them full time. The federal government is making that more difficult, which is having them constantly stay in these temporary housing solutions, often until they age out. Imagine being 18, 19, 20 years old and not having parents. Not because there weren't parents who wanted you, but because the government didn't let them adopt you or waited so long that you already aged out of the system. Why would we do that to anyone? On the other hand, when the federal government does allow people to adopt, then they give them a stipend. I have talked to many formerly adopted children who have emancipated themselves from their adoptive parents, who did not care about them and were only in it for that stipend. They would have multiple children in the same house. They would give them the absolute minimum base care. They did not love them at all. The only reason they had them, the only reason they were bringing them in, was that stipend money. Those kids were not seen as children that they wanted to welcome into their home. They were seen as a source of income, and they were treated accordingly. And they, imagine being a child who is, raised by someone who just sees you as a check. So the federal government should be getting out both ways. It should not be providing stipends, because that leads to these adoption mills that often don't care about the children. And they also shouldn't be making it so difficult for people who do legitimately just want to adopt and have their child for their family, to make it so difficult in the first place. It's none of the government's business, and it's making things worse.
Okay. Let's shift over kind of on the family topic. Let's go into where you and Joe have talked about legalizing all recreational use of drugs. Mm-hmm. And one follow-up comes to that is, what sort of things can we do to help mitigate the harm that can happen to families as a result of drug use? And I would argue myself that prohibition can actually lead to worse harm.
Exactly.
So can you answer in your own words to some people how we can help people in general and reduce the harm that happens that they may be doing to their families as well?
Exactly. One of the greatest things that we can do is stop treating the health issue of abuse of drug abuse, which, let's be clear, addiction is a health issue. Stop treating it like a criminal issue. It is not a criminal issue. When we look at the reasons that people are addicted, they're not addicted because they're loser junkies who don't care about anyone. They're addicted usually because of psychological or social trauma, because of chronic health problems, because of chronic pain issues, because of abuse from other people in their families, drug abuse from other people in their families. It is never just because, oh, I think I'm going to be addicted to drugs today. Okay, I was addicted to drugs for the better part of roughly 10 years. And I have been clean now for just over 14 years, actually. And I can tell you this, I rarely think it's a good idea. I actually never think it's a good idea to be intoxicated. I am not encouraging anyone to use drugs. But I also don't think that the way to deal with people choosing to use drugs, whether they're just doing it recreationally for fun or whether they're actually addicted, at no point is putting them in a cage and ruining their life the way to solve that. And the way that we solve that, or the way to greatly ameliorate things and make it better, because we're never going to get rid of all addiction and all abuse and end all overdoses, but the way that we can greatly reduce the number of them is by taking people who are in addiction out of the black market, take them out of the shadows, so that now if they want help, they can freely try to seek help. And just as importantly, if people want to help them, now they're out of the shadows too, and they can help them without the government getting involved and throwing them in a cage for trying to help people. Right now, if I saw these drug addicts that we see every single day, people that are on the streets on drug problems, having drug problems, people we know who are living in homes but have drug problems, if I wanted to offer them a place where they could safely use their drugs and say, listen, this is a safe place for you to use your drugs. Here are clean needles so that you're not spreading disease. Here is a safe place. Here's some food. Here's something to drink. Here's some water or some juice or something. Here's some soup or a sandwich. Here's some food so you feel a little bit better. And by the way, if at any point you want to get better, if at any point you want to stop being addicted, we are here for you. We care about you. And if you want to go in that room or that building over there, we're going to offer detox services if you want them. Just the fact that they know that someone cares about them, and there have been multiple studies about that, greatly reduces their desire to want to be addicted in the first place. I mean, they've done studies with rats where they had one group of rats who were all isolated and another group of rats that were able to cavort around like rats usually do. Both of those groups were given drugs, as much of the drugs as they wanted. I think it was meth, actually, that they were being given. And the ones that were isolated, almost every single one of them wanted the meth. They would keep going back for the meth because they were socially isolated. The ones that were able to move about freely, most of them, very few of them took the meth. And even the ones who got addicted to meth stopped taking the meth once they were able to be around people. Just that social inclusion would do a great deal to be able to ameliorate and reduce the number of people that have addiction in the first place. And then getting the other ones the help that they need without fear of going to prison would greatly reduce it. It would also greatly reduce the power of cartels in this country that are corrupting police departments and government officials across the country. Getting drugs out of the black market and out of the shadows fixes the problems and greatly reduces the problems that we are facing. It makes our streets safer. It reduces the amount of people with addiction. It reduces the amount of people that are abusing drugs. It reduces every bad thing we are facing, and it allows people who want to use drugs recreationally to do so without being put in a cage and having their life ruined.
All right. Well, we're going to jump over to another topic that I think I've seen 3 questions about in the chat so far, and I know I had in the message box here. So, Bureau of Land Management, national parks, people who they pay their tax dollars for using that, hunters, conservation, state lands, things like that people use and hunt on. If we are potentially selling them, what prevents someone, a major corporation or something, from just buying all the national parks and turning it into Disneyland or something?
Well,
and protecting and how do we maintain those areas for people who think they should be environmental areas?
Right. So in terms of selling off or giving away property, I think that the priority would be on things that aren't natural parks and things like that. There's a ton of things, mineral rights, non-park land that is not, any kind of environmentally endangered thing or anything like that, that could be sold or auctioned off. to do the kind of things we're talking about. The rest of the land should be, according to the 10th Amendment, given to the states. Let's be very clear about something. When the Constitution says what the federal government is even authorized to own in the first place, 28% of American land ain't it. Here's what they're allowed to own: government buildings, military bases, post offices, postal roads, which aren't even a thing anymore. There hasn't been a postal road in the modern era. We now have just roads that everyone uses. What else? Washington, D.C. and the property that's located under it. That's what the federal government is authorized to own. It is not authorized to own entire states. I was in Nevada and Utah, which are like 70, Utah's like 60 or 70% owned by the federal government, the land on it, and Nevada's like 81% owned by the federal government. Why? There's no use to that. Give it to the states, or according to the 10th Amendment, give it to the states or just the people. Let them decide what to do with it. We recently, finally, after like 20 years, the federal government finally passed the funding to be able to fix all of the aging, crumbling infrastructure in our nation's parks, because they had no vested interest in maintaining it, because the government's not a good steward of what it owns, because it can just take as much of it as it wishes whenever it wants to. Allow the states and individuals who care about conservation to have ownership of these properties and these territories, and they will be far better maintained at a far less cost to the taxpayer.
Perfect. Next question: are there any agencies that you think should stay in the federal government?
I think any agency whose only purpose is to protect the lives and the rights and the property of the people should remain. And going, I guess, even further past that, from a legal standpoint, only the ones that are strictly authorized by the Constitution, which means very few of them. Because if you look back to the origins of the U.S. government, whether we're talking about during the constitutional era or before that during the Articles of Confederation era, the government really didn't do much at the federal level, which is what was intended. It's not supposed to do much, because the reality of an organization like a government, the only thing that it really should be doing, if it, both from a moral and a utilitarian standpoint, the only thing it really should be doing is affirming and protecting and defending our lives and our rights and our property, and that's it. Because if it does anything else, it is just a monopoly that is imposing itself on us and telling us how to live our lives. And we've seen the harmful and abusive and inequitable outcomes that have come as a result of that. If instead we simply just take our power back and take our freedom and our money back so we can go live the lives we want to live in cooperation with others, we'll be able to thrive far better than having some centrally planned solution put on us by a bunch of politicians and bureaucrats and cronies.
All right. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of questions in the chat, but I know you're going to have to get going here, and maybe I can talk your scheduler into getting me back on your schedule.
Yeah, we can do these every couple weeks or something like that, so we can get through some of these questions.
Yeah. But before you go, I'd like you to just kind of tell the audience and everyone out there who watches this, what can they do right now to help your campaign? What can they do to help your campaign and down ballot campaigns as well?
Absolutely. So Joe and I and the entire Libertarian Party are working to build with you an army of human liberty fighting for a world set free in our times. And we do need your help. The first thing that I need you to do, if you really want to help us, the first thing I need you to do is go to lp.org, join the Libertarian Party today. It is the Libertarian Party that is standing as the bulwark against the creeping totalitarianism of the Republican and Democratic parties. We are the only ones that have the 50-state ballot access. We are the only ones that have the ground game and the infrastructure and the platform to be able to do this. So we need you to join us. And once you've done that, you can actually go on the website and it shows you all of the different state affiliates. And I encourage you to join your state and local affiliates. If there isn't a local affiliate in your area, you can start one through your state affiliate. Become a part of the grassroots movement for human liberty that is the Libertarian Party. Once you've done that, I invite you to go to Joe20, that's JO20.com, and join our team. We have a volunteer form you can fill out. We'd love for you to go to all of our social media, follow us, share our content. I have a YouTube channel that an increasing number of people are using when they're asked, but what do libertarians think about X? Or, what do libertarians think about this subject or that subject? I have a bunch of videos that are anywhere from 1 or 2 minutes long to 8 or 9 minutes long that break down what libertarians believe about the different things. And if you're able to do so, we would greatly appreciate any contribution you're able to get, because unlike the Republicans, we don't steal from you. We don't rob you to pay for our campaigns.
Is that you or me?
Yeah, no, that was me. Someone was calling me on Facebook. I apologize. Right. We would greatly appreciate a contribution you're able to give if you're able to do it. Unlike the Republicans and Democrats, we don't get federal matching funds, nor would we want it. We don't believe that you should be robbed to pay for our campaigns. We believe that we should have to earn your support. If we have earned your support, then we hope to, we ask for whatever contribution you're able to comfortably give. It's what allows us to do the bus tours and the tours around the country. It's what allows us to do those things every single day to fight for liberty. And I appreciate everyone joining us today. And thank you, Ryan, for your time as well.
Thank you, Spike, and good luck. And I know that you've got to get set up for your own show that you do each week. So Muddied Waters Media, you'll be live on that next,
yes,
right?
I will be live on the Muddy Waters of Freedom at 8-ish, hopefully right around 8, maybe just after 8. And that will be on Muddied Waters Media, but I'll also be sharing it on my social media as well. So I hope to see you in about a half hour.
All right. Thanks, Spike. We'll see you around.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.